Hello again and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Power On with Solar Panels. We're delighted to be joined today by Rick with Infinity Solar. He's the lead solar designer, and Infinity Solar are leaders across the solar space in BC. So my name is Jenna. I'm a Built Environment Initiatives Coordinator with the Community Energy Association. If you haven't met us before, I'll introduce you to CEA in a bit, in a few slides here. So today's webinar is part one of a three-part series. We're going to provide some details in the chat about the next session and where you can go to find more information. But today's session will provide some insights into what to consider when thinking about adding solar panels, available incentives, and understanding what you should be asking your solar contractor to ensure a successful installation. So the next slide there, please. Perfect. So I am joining you from what is now known as Nelson, located on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Snagst, Ktunaxa, and Silks nations. I'm truly honored to live in a place where I feel so deeply connected to the mountains, the waters, and the forests. And I just want to express my deep gratitude for the generations of stewardship since time immemorial by these nations, whose care has helped preserve this land and shape the place we're able to experience today. As we move forward, I hope that we listen, learn, and let ourselves be guided by this stewardship and consider how we can contribute to caring for this land for generations to come. So we like to begin these sessions by highlighting Indigenous leadership in the built environment space. So we have been working alongside Nisga'a Nation for a few years and just want to highlight some of the great work they've been doing over the last couple of years. So Nisga'a Nation is a self-governing First Nation on Canada's Pacific coast. They're primarily located in the Nass River Valley region of northwestern BC. So Nisga'a Nation is working toward the ambitious goal of renovating 900 residential properties, aiming to update every Nisga'a member's home on Nisga'a land. So to achieve this, the nation is building capacity within its own government and community by providing training for government staff, nation members, and building trades workers. So collaborating with provincial industry leaders, Nisga'a Nation is facilitating the sharing and transfer of essential knowledge for the project, and this approach strengthens the skills and expertise needed to execute a successful retrofit program. So there is a QR code and a link at the bottom of the slide there where you can learn more. And again, we will be sharing these slides out, so feel free to click on that link when we do. All right, the next slide there. So I did promise a quick introduction to Community Energy Association for those who are unfamiliar with us. Across BC, local governments recognize that there's a growing demand for more energy efficient, comfortable, and climate resilient homes, as I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here today. But there's still a gap in the workforce need to deliver that work. So contractors and builders need access to the right training to meet this demand, and that's where CEA comes in. So we are a registered charity and nonprofit that works with local governments and Indigenous communities to accelerate action on climate and energy. And since 2017, we've been delivering programming that increases access for both the building community and homeowners to educational and informative resources and supports related to high performance building and home energy retrofits. So that's what we're doing here today. And then I'm just going to pass things over to my colleague Mariah here, who's just going to jump in and tell you a little bit in more detail about our Retrofit Assist program, just on the next slide there.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, my name's Mariah Byers. I'm the program manager for Retrofit Assist. Retrofit Assist is our energy concierge service offered by Community Energy Association. So what does that mean exactly? This program, it's a free offering to homeowners to support them through their home energy retrofits start to finish. And that support is flexible in terms of what the homeowner or renter is needing. So the support that we offer can start with scheduling an EnerGuide evaluation. It can be prioritizing which upgrades to move forward with, connecting with contractors, reviewing quotes, helping you access rebates, and much more. As of right now, our program is offered in Whistler, Squamish, Vernon, Kamloops, RDEK, and Roslyn, and we're hoping to expand into more municipalities in the future. If interested, you can check out our website, which we'll post in the chat. And if you happen to live in any of those municipalities, I recommend that you apply and we can start you on the journey of upgrading your home. Thanks, Jenna.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mariah. And we'll include some more details in the follow-up email to come as well. So if you didn't catch all that today, we'll give you some resources to dive into it a little bit further. Okay, that's enough from us. We're going to pass things over to Rick, who's going to give us a quick presentation, and then we'll have lots of time for your questions as well. So Rick is the sales and design manager with Infinity Solar. He joined the team 3 years ago after a 15-year career as personal finance professional. Originally from Regina, Rick and his family relocated to Castlegar in 2019. He's heavily involved in the basketball community as a long time referee and coach, and uses the skills he has developed from the financial and coaching worlds to help customers examine the ins and outs of solar and make an informed decision. So we're here to learn more about that today. And over to you, Rick.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I am on PowerPoint right now and can't really see who all is here, but I welcome you all. And I did recognize a few names as they popped in. So welcome to you if we're meeting again or if it's for the first time. So again, I am the solar design and sales manager at Infinity. We are based in Invermere, but operate across Western Canada. So kind of basics of solar, and we'll get into more detail as we go. And of course, if you have any questions, I look forward to answering them at the end. I'm going to try and keep things as high level as we can, and then every situation's a little different. So I look forward to chatting at the end here. So how does solar work? So it's pretty easy. The sunlight has the photons. Your photons hit the solar panel, and it makes a little electron dance back and forth between two layers, which creates a DC current, DC electricity current that flows down into inverters, whether that's a microinverter or a central inverter, which changes it to the 120 AC power that your house or your business would typically use. And that goes right into your main electrical panel typically. That then becomes a secondary source of power in addition to the grid that you're connected to. As the solar is producing electricity, if it's producing enough to power everything in your house, then you don't need to pull anything from the grid. Once the solar is not producing as much power as your building is demanding, then you would top up with the grid all the way until later in the evening when the sun goes away, the solar is not producing anything, and you'd be taking all your electricity from the grid at that point. So why solar can work here in BC is grid tied and net metering or net billing, which they're bringing in. So as your solar is overproducing electricity, producing more electricity than you need, it backfeeds it to the grid, and your utility company gives you a credit for that. So that credit would accumulate to be used later that day when the sun goes away, or continues to build up on your bill as a credit to be used as future billing credits all the way throughout the year. So excuse me. So it's a way of you producing enough electricity on an annual basis to offset your bill. So we know we have long sunny summer days here in BC, and then shorter, darker, cloudy days in winter where many communities get lots of snow and the solar does not produce very well, if not, sometimes not even at all for weeks at a time. So it all works with the bidirectional meter that most people have installed already. Some utility companies still need to install that in the province, and then that keeps track of how many kilowatt hours you've pushed back to the grid and how many kilowatt hours you take off the grid. So it shows up on your bill, whether it's a monthly or bi-monthly bill, depending on your utility company. So again, is it complicated? It's not. The solar panels go up either on your roof or a ground mount, and there's very little, if no maintenance. So we get enough precipitation in our province that it keeps panels usually clear of dust. If it does get covered in snow, once the sun comes out, panels are dark, they attract the heat of the sun, melts those panels off. Some issues can be, sap if you have a lot of trees next to you, or birds and rodents getting under there and creating a nest. We do a lot of work in Alberta, in the Calgary area. Most people put a netting around their panels, where we have found that's not as required here in BC. Probably a little less pigeons than out east, I guess. The microinverters are all up on, if we use microinverters, they're up on the roof with the panels, or you have a central inverter inside the house typically. And so there's no real moving parts, there's no maintenance, there's no oiling of anything that needs to be done. Once the panels are up on the roof, it is kind of a set it and forget it method. There are options for looking at doing, tilt mounted panels to try and better capture the sunlight throughout different times of the year. You're looking for the direct sunlight. Think of it as, as straight on as you can get versus a glancing blow won't give you as much production. So we're always looking for a south-facing roof is going to be the best. East and west roofs are okay. Anything that slants north just doesn't get any direct sunlight on it enough to really justify ever putting panels on a north sloping roof. You will get sunlight on that roof and it will produce a little bit, but not enough to justify the cost to put the panels on there. Once they're on there, we typically are just looking at the same angle of the roof, flat mounting them as we can. If you have a flat roof, you can do a little bit of tilt, but we want to keep track of what the load could be for wind load as well as snow load on your roofs there. The tilt mounting options are relatively still pretty expensive, and it would take a long time for the increased production you would get by having panels that can tilt to properly catch the sun throughout the year than if you just go with a regular flat mount. Number one question you get, right, is how much solar can I add? How do we determine how much solar I can go with? So there's kind of three main factors that will limit what you can do. One is obviously going to be your roof size. How much room do you have with viable spots to put solar on your roof? The second is going to be your electrical panel. So Canadian Electric Code will limit, excuse me, how much solar you can connect to an electrical panel. And that is going to be based on the amp rating of your panel as well as the bus bar rating. So we do a lot of work where people are either modifying an existing panel or upgrading their system to add more solar as you go. And then the third is going to be what your utility company allows you to connect. So most companies here in Alberta, or in BC, will allow you to go to about 100 to 110% of your last 12 months of electricity usage. So that's a big part is gathering and seeing what the traditional, historical usage has been at your house, and then working with you to design a system that would produce as much solar as you can or whatever fits your budget at that time. There are cases where someone is now adding an EV charger, or adding a hot tub, or adding heat pumps are a big one, where your electric usage is going to increase. So we can work with the utility company to either allow you to go bigger from the start, or you revisit it after a year or two of consumption with the increase, and then we're able to add more panels at that time. In British Columbia, you're looking anywhere from what I would say is like a 90 to 120% production rate. So for every kilowatt of electricity, every kilowatt of solar you install, you're going to produce about 900 to 1200 kilowatt hours of electricity. So if you're looking at a typical home using around 11,000 kilowatt hours, 12,000 kilowatt hours, 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, you're looking around a 10 kilowatt solar array to produce that amount of electricity. That's going to change depending on where you live. Out east, Cranbrook area, you're getting a little bit more sunshine than you do in the lower mainland. And then you're looking at other factors like obviously trees, other buildings, mountains, they'll all factor into the annual production rates, as well as if you're in one of the lovely ski resort towns where you get a lot of snow in the winter, you're not going to produce much, if anything, for those couple of months. But you can still, the numbers can still make lots of sense to do, even not getting a lot of production in the winter. Batteries have now become a larger portion of our business as the prices have come down, and BC Hydro has introduced a rebate program for them. So with grid-tied solar, because it is tied to the grid, if the grid was to go down, the solar has an automatic safety feature on it that stops your solar from producing. So solar by itself does not give you backup power in the event of an outage. Otherwise, if the panels are continuing to produce, again, if you're overproducing electricity, it could be sending it back to the grid and electrocuting whoever's going to fix that. So you have emergency shut off, that stops working. To have a system that would continue to work, you would then add a special hybrid inverter as well as a battery bank. Typically, you're looking at then identifying some critical loads that you're going to want to power. You would put those onto a separate electrical panel. These are going to be smaller loads: fridge, freezer, TV, internet, furnace fan if you have a non-electric heat source, natural gas or propane, that type of thing. Well pumps is another big one, so that if the grid goes down, your battery are going to kick in and power those smaller loads, as well as allow the solar to continue to work to power those smaller loads and recharge the batteries. So as we were saying, if the grid went down in the summer when you get lots of sunny days, between your batteries and the solar, you'd be able to withstand multiple day outages without any issue, as the sunshine is going to recharge the batteries every day. If the grid goes down in the winter when we have not much sunshine, cloudy, snowy days, the solar might not give you any extra production, and you'd just be relying on the amount of batteries you had to get through that power outage. So usually we're usually putting battery banks in that would last, a typical 12 to 24 hour outage. And then of course it'd last longer if it was sunny out and you're getting more production. Okay. Some utility companies in BC have time of use charges right now, or maybe bringing that in the future. Batteries would allow you to use battery power to help offset or eliminate the amount of electricity you need to take off the grid during these peak times, and then allow you to recharge the batteries at your cheaper overnight rates, and or use the solar the next day if it's available. So that's a way of kind of making and saving a little bit of additional money with a battery system. Rate trends. So we're looking anywhere from BC Hydro is locked in at 3.75% annual increase for the next couple of years on your utilities. Fortis has been over 6% a couple times in the last few years. Nelson Hydro is a smaller utility company in and around the town of Nelson. They've seen some big increases, including almost a 16% increase on their rural rates this year. We're seeing very similar higher single-digit increases in Alberta, and you're seeing more and more talk of increase of these utility rates as you go up, things like increased demand because of EV chargers and heat pumps and data centers that are going in that are just creating a huge strain on the grid as the utility companies look for ways to power these devices. And that's either going to be increased rates as a stick to stop you from consuming as much, or carrots to help. There's a peak saver program available with BC Hydro now to kind of entice you to not use as much or save more. So a way to avoid that and kind of protect yourself from the inflation rate of the utilities going up is going to be creating your own electricity with solar. As these utility companies are trying to come up again with ways to power the increased demand, you're looking at Alberta looking at doing solar, or at looking at coal again. You're talking about nuclear, which is going to be 10 years before they ever bring anything on. Site C is up and running and not producing enough electricity for what BC Hydro needs. And so solar is the quickest way to get massive amounts of electricity onto the grid. We're going to see more and more demand from people as the price of solar continues to go down, as your utility rates continue to go up and up and up every year. Just quick little information here about how, even though we have pretty good incentives here in Canada, we're still way behind on the solar game compared to Asia, especially the United States, places that aren't really that much sunnier than we are as an annual sunlight hour region. So we have lots of untapped room here to continue to expand the solar and to strengthen the grid with renewable energy. just maybe quickly some of the rebates available out there right now. So in the province of BC, if you're with BC Hydro, there's a $5,000 rebate for residential solar on any 5 kilowatt system or larger. So we have a lot of customers that are just starting with a 5 kilowatt system, maxes out their rebate for now, gets that solar installed on the roof, gets them saving money right away. And then in a couple of years, the plan is that once they see how it's producing, how much they're still paying over and above what the solar is producing, they would then look to expand and add more solar at that time. Additionally, there's a $5,000 rebate now for batteries with BC Hydro, which, again, as long as you have a 10 kilowatt battery bank or larger, you would qualify for an additional $5,000. So we do have some that are opting for the 5 kilowatt solar and the 10 kilowatt battery to then try and kind of max out the rebates available and then look to refine their system in the future. Unfortunately, for other utility providers in the province, that is not being reciprocal rebates available right now. Hopefully, there's something that comes in the future. Federally, if you have commercial, so I guess with BC Hydro, if it's a commercial building, you can get up to a $10,000 rebate, as well as a $10,000 rebate for batteries. So commercial buildings a little bit bigger, need a little bit more power typically. So another option there. Federally, there are no longer any residential programs. There used to be the Canada Greener Homes program, which I would assume a lot of people in here may or may not be familiar with. That provided a rebate for solar as well as other energy saving retrofits, as well as up to a $40,000 interest-free loan. That all ended over a year ago, and fingers crossed something comes again. It's we have a lot of people still asking about that, and I think it's a fantastic program. Federally, tax incentives, if you have a commercial building, you can qualify for a 30% refundable tax credit. So commercial buildings with BC Hydro works out really well. You can get your $10,000 rebate from BC Hydro, as well as the 30% refundable tax credit, and then 100% capital cost allowance in there as well. So really some great incentives there if you own a commercial building to take advantage of now before they change. BC Hydro started at $25,000 when the rebates first came out, and it's dropped to $10,000. We haven't been told of any changes, but it makes sense to try and get as much free money as you can. That's for sure. I think that's pretty much what we got. So I would be opening up to questions now. I try and keep things as high level as I can, and then happy to discuss individual situations either now, or you can reach out. We have a free, no hassle estimate program to provide individual numbers for your situation, and you can meet with me and discuss and go from there. So I will pass it back to Jenna and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for that. And folks, feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A. We do have a couple in line, and then, or you can raise your virtual hand and ask Rick directly. Rick, just to give you a break, Brady, I see Brady in the audience. Brady Sturgeon, just since we were on the topic of rebates, I thought maybe Brady, you could tell us a little bit about the role that the Home Performance Contractor Network plays kind of in those solar rebates, if you don't mind being put on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenna. I'm happy to. I was going to actually throw some stuff in the chat, but I can see it's disabled. So yeah, I was happy to be here and share a little bit, because we are connected with the BC Hydro solar and battery rebates. So if you haven't heard of the Home Performance Stakeholder Council, we have an initiative called the Home Performance Contractor Network. And we essentially, our job is to qualify contractors for certain rebate programs. We do have a bit of a process for that. So typically that can, start with reference checks, and in some cases, not for solar battery, but in some cases it could be requiring certain upskilling in a certain program or sector. So we don't have that currently with solar battery. We're just asking you to share what your current training is. And then we'll get a better idea of the sector at that point. And then we ask for a few business documents. That could be insurance and business licenses, things like that. Just make sure that you're a qualified business, you're fully registered, you're insured. Sign our network agreement, and then any installer that is on our network is also across. They're shared on our Find a Contractor search tool, and you can see what contractors are eligible for what rebates, for example, on that search tool. So I can share. I have a link that might be helpful. That is just a bit of a overview of the solar and battery registration process. I don't know if I can drop that somewhere, or maybe
I'll give you co-host permission, okay, so you can access the chat, and then everyone in the room will see.
So you'll see there's a guides link there. So that's a bit of a process on the solar and battery registration. And then on that same guide, you can check our other sectors. You can also see what the expectations are, what the rebate. If you go to the rebate eligibility tab, you can see what rebates are aligned with us and what you need to do for what rebates. And so, feel free to check it out. And if you have questions, you can also send me an email, and I will connect you with the right person on our team. I don't onboard solar and battery specifically, but I can connect you with the member of our team that has a lot more information on that. And just, I guess, another little thing that I'll mention about the HPSC is the way that we operate is with our sector councils. So we have councils of individuals that are industry specific. So we work with HVAC, insulation, windows, doors, energy advisors, general retrofit contractors as well. And each of those sectors do have a sector council. And so we really look to our sector council to share what the needs are for the sector. And then that identifies like what training is required for each sector. So, and of course, any training that we make mandatory, we also will point to, do our best always to make sure that we have training subsidies so that, if you're paying out of pocket, you can always apply to get that money back. If we're expecting you to, do any upskilling, then that's a huge part of our mission, is we don't want to leave people out of pocket. So, and again, I did mention for solar and battery, we're not requiring any training. That may change in the future when we have our sector council and we work with them, and they might say, yeah, bare minimum solar and battery installers should have this course, that course, right? So at that time, we might start to see stronger training requirements, and then alongside that would most likely also be training subsidies. So that's in the works. Currently, we don't have a sector council for solar battery, and it's just purely onboarding and taking the old program contractors and moving them over to HPCN at this point, and working with rebate training as well. So that might be required for the sector, but that's sort of my spiel. And if anyone has questions or is curious about either the sector councils, that I'm the main contact for that. I'm the manager of industry engagement. So anyone who might be interested in sector council, please reach out to me. And then anyone who might be interested in just onboarding and being rebate eligible, or possibly in the future taking some training and getting reimbursed for that, then feel free to reach out. And you can also reach out to info@homeperformance.ca if you just have general inquiry questions.
Great. Thanks, Brady. All right, folks, a little bit behind the scenes for the contractor's experience. I know most of you on the call are homeowners, but you can better understand kind of what goes into the requirements for these rebate programs and the eligibility for the contractors who will be doing the work. So thanks so much, Brady, for that context and for that contact information. And yeah, I do encourage you folk to reach out directly to Home Performance Contractor Network. They're a great resource.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna.
All right. Okay. So we are moving back to Rick here with some questions from the Q&A. So a reminder, folks, if you have questions, to pop them right into that Q&A function, or you can raise your virtual hand and ask Rick directly. So our first question here is from Sue, and she asks, she says, when her house was evaluated a few years ago, she was told that their best investment was in a heat pump, and that in the future, more heat pump capacity would be a better investment than rooftop solar. And she's wondering if this is still the case, or if things have changed in terms of that best investment.
Yeah, it would certainly depend, and I'm by no means a heat pump expert, but it would look at kind of how you're heating your home before. I'm assuming it was baseboard heating, so you can really drastically lower your electricity consumption by going from baseboard heating to a heat pump. You're still going to be using electricity to do that, and so then you're still going to be subject to the annual rate increases that you're going to see from your utility company. What we actually have seen probably 10 times now was customers who were considered solar in the early kind of 2000s or 2020s, dating myself, in the early 2020s, when the Canada Greener Home was announced and heat pumps and solar were both eligible expenses. And so we had a lot of people comparing heat pumps to solar and deciding to go with heat pumps instead of solar, thinking that it was going to lower their overall usage. What we found was that a lot of these people didn't have air conditioning, and so they were lowering their utility rates, their utility bills in the winter by using heat pumps instead of their baseboard heaters. But now they're running the heat pump as air conditioning in the summer, so their total usage was still relatively the same, if not even going up sometimes. So then they were coming back to us, especially once BC Hydro announced their rebate for solar. They were coming and adding solar in after the fact. So it's not always an either or. It's kind of a whole combination of trying to lower your overall usage off the grid. With solar, you're going to be able to produce your own electricity and protect yourself from those rate increases. But if you can drastically reduce the amount you're taking off by getting a heat pump, especially if you're needing to replace a furnace or using the baseboard heating, then that could be, it could work out as a strictly financial reason, a better option than solar. But solar is always going to continue to give you that stability of your monthly expenses going forward.
Great. Thanks for that. A little bit of a complex question, but thanks for tackling it. Melanie's just wondering what the area of a 5 kilowatt system would be. How much space does a 5 kilowatt system cover?
Yeah, I'm terrible with square footage, but the panels we use right now are essentially like 6 feet by 4 feet, and you would need 10 of them. So you're usually, like, on a typical house, you would be a 10 kilowatt would cover like most of like a south-facing roof. So kind of our two most popular sizes are 5 kilowatts and 12 kilowatts. 12 kilowatts happens to usually be around the maximum you can install on a 200 amp electrical panel. And 80% of the time, the 12 kilowatt system would fit on a house roof. So we're usually running out of electrical panel capacity or your existing electricity consumption before we run out of roof space. But every situation is obviously different. But
Great,
that's
perfect.
Yeah, kind of the number one question we get is, why can't I add more solar?
Okay. And it's not space usually.
It's not a space issue. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay, perfect. All right. Ted says, thanks, Rick. And he's wondering if you could give a sense of the overall cost to install a 10 kilowatt battery system. Or I know you just
Sure.
mentioned that 12 was your most common, but
so as a kind of that 5 to 12 kilowatts, you're usually looking around the like $14,000 to $30,000 mark. So 30,000 would be your 12 kilowatt system. So the 10 kilowatt, you'd be around the 25,000 plus GST, and that's for fully installed. That's most people are quoting everything fully installed. So it's all the material, all the labor, your monitoring app, your warranty, the permits that are required, either with the utility company or the jurisdiction that you're living in. It's all kind of a one-shot price. So one of the questions we see is that's usually about the right price for the solar by itself. What you will see is some companies will build in financing charges, and so you'll get a system that is much more expensive than that, but then they've worked out a way to give you a lower monthly payment on that. So we're selling you on the monthly payment versus the total price. So along with ensuring that the person you're working with is qualified with the home performance people, that would be another issue, is just kind of seeing if there's any red flags as forcing financing or not. And that's another thing. If you ever have a quote from someone and it doesn't quite seem right, and you want to get a second opinion, you want to send it to us, we're always right in line with standard pricing, and happy to talk with you, even if you're in a jurisdiction we don't work with, or you want to work with someone more local to you.
great. And Rick, does that, I'm assuming that doesn't include the cost of batteries. Do you have an idea around what that would cost additionally?
Yeah, so the batteries gets a little more complicated as BC Hydro is changing the rebate eligibility in 12 days. But our current battery system is about an extra $11,000 for a 10 kilowatt system, and then that entitles you to the second $5,000 rebate. So then you'd be out of pocket about $6,000 to add batteries.
Great. And I just want to circle back to you had mentioned this in kind of your response there, but I think it's worth revisiting and just highlighting kind of what should be included in a quote. What should people make sure is included in a quote when they're looking at a quote from a solar installer? Yeah,
you're definitely going to want to see which panels, solar panels they're using, and making sure they're showing you what panels they're using. Not every solar panel is created equally. Quick Google searches will show you which ones are kind of rated at tier A and which ones are a little bit below that. Which inverter series are you using? Is it going to be microinverters? Is it a larger kind of in the home central inverter? There's pros and cons to both of those. You're going to want to see probably at least a 25-year warranty on your parts, and some 5-year workmanship warranty on there. You don't want to just send your money to someone who's just kind of passing through town. You want to be working with a company that's going to be around if down the road you have warranty issues to take care of. And then just making sure that they're qualified with all the programs in the province to qualify you for the rebates, as well as workers' compensation, that type of thing. In case someone falls off your roof when they're installing your panels, you want to make sure that you're not going to be held liable for that. So just kind of basic stuff like that, but it's not uncommon to run into companies that aren't doing everything properly.
Great, thank you. All right, we have another question in the chat. So this participant, they already have solar panels and they want to add battery to their current system. So the question is, can they add a battery option to their existing panel system that is integrated with BC Hydro?
Yes. So there's kind of two things, is that depending on the inverter system you have, can it properly communicate with a hybrid inverter to allow the solar to continue to work if the grid goes down, which is great. And if not, it's not that big a deal either, because the battery system, if you're putting, like I said, if you're putting in a 10 kilowatt battery system, which gets you the full BC Hydro rebate, that's going to last you, typically 16 to 24 hours, even without any solar continuing to work and top up the batteries. So there, any outages that last more than a day here are very rare. And then you could always add more batteries instead of doing that. The other way is that you would change out the existing inverter you have to one that would allow the solar to continue to work if the grid goes down. So you can swap out older microinverters to new microinverters that work, or you would swap out your existing central inverter to a hybrid inverter. So just a little bit more money to do that. Most of the customers that we've kind of given that option to have opted to just add more battery instead of swapping out inverters, but some have done the inverter swap.
Great. Thank you. Can solar panels be mounted on residential metal roofs? What kind of roofs can solar panels be mounted on?
Yeah, so metal roofs work. Standing seam is our favorite because we can just use clamps that go right onto the ridges. Tin roofs work. Cement tile roofs work, though you will often have an increased cost because it's about a 4 times as laborious job to do that and more expensive for the anchors. But yeah, most roofs we can do. The only ones we've ever really ran into trouble are the cement tiled ones that are arched. And there was no way to really get an anchor in there. Anything under 5 degrees tilt on your roof, so if it's a flat roof, we can just ballast mount it. So you're tilt mounting at 10 degrees and then using cement blocks to hold the system down. But typically a metal roof is easy depending on different situations, but I'd say 9 out of 10 times it's pretty doable.
Great. Folks are wondering where Infinity Solar is located. What areas do you service? And I'll also flag folks, if you've ever heard of Kootenay Solar or been to a presentation by Kootenay Solar, this is still Kootenay Solar, now known as Infinity Solar.
Correct. Yeah. So Kootenay Solar started 7 years ago in Invermere. They then brought on a childhood friend to run Rocky View Solar, which is operating just outside of Calgary. And then 2 years ago, we merged everything into Infinity Solar to be less geographically specific. So we still do the majority of our work and most of the stuff that we install ourselves in anywhere from kind of Grand Forks, Invermere, over to Fernie, Sparwood area. But over the last year, we have brought on over 50 certified contractors as electrical firms that we help service all over Western Canada. So we've done projects, Saskatchewan, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Edmonton, Lower Mainland, Kamloops, all throughout the Okanagan. And we're still hoping for that first one on the island. But so yeah, we can service anywhere. So what's great is we handle all the back end. So we do the sales, the permitting, all your monitoring, you keep track of everything on the solar end, and then you have your local electrician who is able to do the installation, do the electrical work. You can have that relationship with them. Often you have a relationship with your electrician already, and then we just are able to provide the back end for the solar with them. So pretty much anywhere in BC we can work with, and we're able to work with our partners to do the installation instead of having to charge extra for us to travel up there. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Great, thanks, Rick. And you just mentioned local electricians doing the installations. So maybe just highlighting there, who should folks be hiring and maybe not hiring for their solar install?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're doing it all properly, you want to make sure that your permits are in place with the utility company as well as your city or municipality before you're ever having solar put up on your roof. There are instances of companies just installing right away and then waiting for the permit to come in, or not even doing the permit, and then homeowners are having trouble when the inspector comes and asks for their permit on their solar 2 years later. They need to take them off and redo everything. So you're going to want to make sure that you're working with a company that is upfront with how long the permitting process takes, and that they will handle that on your behalf and get it all ready before they're showing up to install panels on your roof. We only work with certified Red Seal electricians to handle all of our electrical permits and our connecting of the panels to your house. These, I mean, we're looking at 10 kilowatts of power, not more. So it's serious amount of power. It could really hurt someone. So you really want to make sure you're working with experts who know what they're doing, and having everything wired up properly, so you're not worried about a short or something causing a fire, or even worse in the future.
Okay, we've been hearing stories of roofing contractors doing solar installations, so maybe.
Yeah, so same sort of thing, right? You have these people that are coming in. More often than not, it's door to door, but not all door to door people are bad. I don't want to say that. But the roofers have a lot of the equipment to get up on your roof, obviously, to put the panels up. So they're doing that and kind of get the panels up, take your money, and away they go before you really even know who they are, or where they're located, or what their qualifications are. So again, just we're typically seeing, a 1 to 3 week sales process to even get anything signed. Giving you all the options, giving you different scenarios, letting you think on things. And then depending on the jurisdiction, it could be another 4 to 6 weeks to get the permits in properly. So we're not trying to rush you through anything. We're trying to make sure you're making an informed decision, and we're doing everything by the book. So there won't be any problems down the road.
Great. And I know we've asked this question already, but we'll revisit it because it might have been missed. But Sid asks, how much space does a 10 kilowatt battery? Oh, 10 kilowatt battery take. Right. Sorry, not a panel.
Different setups for battery. You can have a wall-mounted one. We're now using server rack style batteries. So it's essentially the size of like a large briefcase. It's about 10 inches high by 20 inches deep, 20 inches wide, and then they just stack on top of each other. So doesn't take up that much space. And then those can also be wall mounted, but most people are stacking them on the ground. So you're kind of looking at 3 feet by 3 feet as a spot in your mechanical room or garage.
Okay. Folks, just a heads up, we do have about 10 minutes left, but I will be running our feedback poll. So you'll see that pop up on your screen. We do really appreciate your feedback, and we take it into consideration when we plan out future sessions, but we will continue to ask Rick all of your questions till the top of the hour here. So our next question here is just asking if you could speak to bifacial solar panels and how it's working if it's on a roof.
Right. So bifacial solar panels allow photons to generate electricity not only on the front of the panel but on the back of the panel, and they used to be quite a bit more expensive than the monofacial, which only allowed light in from the front, but the prices come down on those so much that we only use bifacial panels now. Even if it is on a roof, you're not going to see like a huge difference in production with the little bit of photons that will reach the backside of a panel. But it is a little bit, and again, the price difference is so negligible now that we only do bifacial. So the way I kind of can think of it is with direct sunlight is going to give you your best production. So if you have your hose with your hose attachment on it, and you have it on the full blast one that's spraying, it's going to hit the front of the panel, and that's about it. On our cloudy days that we get a lot of around here, especially in the winter, you think of it as like the mister setting on your hose. So it's spraying all over the place, and you're going to get some onto the backside of it by that way too. So different ways of the sunlight hitting it. It's not going to be much, but again, the price difference is basically nothing now. So it just makes sense too. So the panels will sit about 4 or 5 inches above your roof. So there is space for light to kind of get in there and bounce off your roof. And it won't be substantial, but it's something.
Perfect. All right. Great. So we've got a few more questions here. I'm wondering if there's a possibility of using electric batteries from EVs in addition to your solar installation or your battery installation.
So, bidirectional EV chargers, to my knowledge, are not approved for use in Canada right now. The last time I checked, the only vehicle that has that capability is the Ford Lightning. I think you're going to see more cars with that capability in the future. So what some people do is you can use your EV if you have like a 120 outlet in it to plug in your fridge, but you have to run it, outside to your car. But I do think that that's going to be something that we see. You run into the issues of, just like with solar, that if you have your car plugged in trying to push electricity back to your main panel, there needs to be a safety switch to stop that electricity from going back onto the grid to injure the lineman that's going to fix the down power line. So I think that is coming up, but at this time there's no options.
Great, thank you. All right. Participant asks, they say on their municipal/BC provincial residential assessment, the solar potential value is considered low. How is this calculated, and could this estimate be erroneous? Roof planes face both east-west sides and trees are on the south side of the house.
I'll be honest, I've never heard of that, the municipality giving you an opinion on if solar makes sense for you or not. But based on that situation, like you said, is east-west roof with a south shade, then that could be, right, it could easily not be worth to add solar. So again, you're looking at the good solar projects are going to be ones that produce, that 100 to 120% of the size of your array to your annual production. A little bit lower than that, it can make sense. East roofs, we usually see about a 15 to 20% drop in production versus a south-facing roof. So it can still be worth it. Now that your utility companies are charging you, a blended of, 13 to 16 cents a kilowatt hour, those lower performing solar roofs could start to make sense, as you're still going to be producing electricity at an average rate much lower than you're paying the utility company. So we've had some people that have opted, again, just to do, like, if you happen to be in a BC Hydro region, do the 5 kilowatts, because you get basically 40% of the install covered by the rebate, which is going to produce electricity at you much cheaper than you're paying your utility company right now, let alone what the rates are going to continue to increase by.
Okay, great. And just
we are not afraid to tell people your roof makes no sense for solar.
Great. Some context there. It was the District of North Vancouver who
Okay.
offered that solar potential.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question here around batteries. So and specific to the rebate. So whether or not the rebate works to add on Bluetti battery packs. If you're familiar with those.
I am.
Existing Bluetti system.
So my understanding is that it's not, because it can't be properly integrated into the grid. I could be correct, but what we have done is people who have a Bluetti or EcoFlow Delta or Jack or any of these portable battery systems, if a full integrated, hands-off system is out of their price range, we say, yeah, go get a Bluetti, 3 kilowatt battery for $2,000 or $3,000. You can keep it plugged in your house. If the grid goes down, you can manually run an extension cord to that to plug in things, right? You want to take it camping on the weekend, now you have that as well. But it's essentially more of like an off-grid type of battery system, camping off-grid, that type of thing. So just like other off-grid, if you did off-grid solar, BC Hydro, it doesn't help them, secure their grid or equalize their grid at all. So they're not providing any rebates for you.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we've got a couple more questions in the chat. We'll try to get through them here in their
Speed
last couple
round.
minutes. Aaron's wondering if panels can be mounted on a south-facing wall, mounted vertically.
So we definitely have done that. We also have awning mounts, which tilt out at 60 degrees. So that's actually Eden, our CEO, was hoping to join, but he's not. He's up in the cusp, putting on a bunch of awning mounts on a south roof there. So it's definitely possible. You typically do get pretty good production out of those. Just with the 60-degree tilt, it's not quite as good. The flat mount would be even less, but you're still probably getting just as good production as you would on a east-west mounted mounted panels.
Great. And Rob's wondering if you can speak to rooftop water sprinklers for fire protection, how that would work with solar panels.
It shouldn't affect anything, right? Everything is weatherproof for Canadian weather. So whether it's heavy rain or snowfall or hail, the panels and the inverters are all rated to handle that. So if you had sprinklers up there that you wanted to turn on in case a forest fire was approaching, you'd certainly be able to do that. You would also have the option of just turning the solar off with your breaker on your panel, on your electrical panel, to mitigate any risk of that happening with the fire. So same thing once fire safety. If there's fire in the neighborhood or fire in the house, once the grid gets disconnected to your house, then the solar stops producing.
Great, good to know. All right, we just
Maybe
have
sorry, I'm just going to jump in on another question we get, like kind of along that lines, is like the de-icing heat trace wire to run in the winter to keep snow and ice off your panels. It's just not worth it for how much extra production you get. You're going to spend more electricity heating the panels to clear them off than you'll get in production. And
Right.
those heat trace, and we've had people that have done it and they've kind of lasted 2 years and then they have to do it again. So they're just not saving any money.
Right. All right, more of a comment here, but I think is a nice closing one. Just sharing that participant solar panels are on the ground. They've only had a hydro bill in January and February. But they have an electric car and electric heating in the house, and they said it's well worth the cost of installation. And you know what? We have 1 minute left. We're going to squeeze this last question that came in as I was reading that out. So we've heard of balcony solar panels in Europe. What products are available here in Canada?
So the short answer is nothing.
Okay.
The longer answer is that in a balcony solar, depending exactly what they mean by this, but we get a lot of questions from people in apartments or condos where they don't own the roof. So you're trying to get a little bit of production off your balcony. The short answer is that BC Hydro doesn't have a rebate for those types of systems. Longer answer is that it's often your electrical panel isn't in your suite with you, so we can't hook the solar up to your panel to produce. Longer answer is that's another maybe spot for like a Blue Eddy where you get your own little 400-watt panel that you can put out on the balcony to produce a little electricity, power up that Blue Eddy, and have your run some stuff with that. Often those things are not allowed by your strata rules, so I would defer to make sure you're not breaking any rules that way. But yeah, that's kind of all the answers I have for that.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. Folks, just a reminder, we will be following up within the week to provide you a link to this recording. If you want to rewatch it, go back to anything. We'll also have the slides and we can provide contact information for Infinity Solar if you want to reach out and learn more. So thanks, Rick, for sharing that. I know it was you covered a very broad range of kind of questions and topics there, and really appreciate your insights. And thanks to everyone on the call for joining us and sharing your questions. And thanks to my colleagues, Amber and Mariah, for helping things go smoothly in the back end. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to talk about this,
everybody.
take care.